August 1941. A young woman stands at a Soviet Army recruiting station in Odessa. She's 24 years old, a university student studying history. The recruiting officer looks her up and down with barely concealed contempt. He's seen thousands of volunteers since Nazi Germany invaded the Soviet Union 2 months ago. Most of the women want to be nurses, telephone operators, support staff. Safe jobs away from the front lines. This woman is different. She doesn't want to be a nurse. She wants a rifle. She wants to kill fascists. The officer laughs. Women aren't soldiers. Women certainly aren't snipers. He tries to send her to nursing training. She refuses. She demands to take the sniper qualification test. The audacity of it. The recruiting officer, irritated now, decides to teach her a lesson. Fine. Take the test. Fail. Go home. They hand her a Mosin Nagant rifle. It's heavy, old, reliable. She checks it professionally. Chambering, trigger, sights. The officers exchange glances. She knows her way around a rifle. That's unexpected. They set up targets. She takes her position. Breathes. Aims. Fires. Bullseye. She chambers another round. Aims. Fires. Bullseye. Nobody is laughing now. The officer stares at the targets, then at her, then back at the targets. 2 perfect shots. No hesitation. No beginner's luck. This woman knows exactly what she's doing. Her name is Lyudmila Pavlichenko. In the next 2 years, she will become the most successful female sniper in military history. She will kill 309 confirmed enemy soldiers, 36 of them enemy snipers sent specifically to hunt her. Her estimated total kill count will exceed 700. The Nazis will put a bounty on her head, calling her Lady Death. They will send their best snipers to eliminate her. Every single one of them will fail. She will survive battles that killed thousands, endure conditions that broke hardened soldiers, and become a symbol of Soviet resistance that inspired millions. This is her story. This is the story of how a university student became the deadliest woman in history. To understand Lyudmila Pavlichenko, we must start at the beginning, in a world that never imagined women as warriors, in a childhood that prepared her for a war nobody wanted, but everyone saw coming. Lyudmila Pavlichenko was born on July 12, 1916, in Bielets Tserkva, a small town in Ukraine, then part of the Russian Empire on the verge of revolution. Her timing was terrible. She was born into a world about to be consumed by war, revolution, civil war, famine, and political terror. The Russian Empire would fall when she was barely a year old. The Bolshevik Revolution would tear Russia apart. The Russian Civil War would kill millions. Stalin would rise to power and transform the Soviet Union through industrialization, collectivization, and purges that would murder millions more. Lyudmila grew up in this turbulent world. Her father worked in a factory. Her mother was a teacher. They were working-class Soviet citizens, not privileged, not connected, just ordinary people trying to survive in extraordinary times. The family moved to Kiev when Lyudmila was young. She attended school, excelled academically, showed particular aptitude in history and languages. She was intelligent, determined, competitive, traits that would serve her well in the unimaginable future that awaited her. But what really defined young Lyudmila was something unexpected for a girl in 1930s Soviet Union. She loved shooting. At age 14, she joined a shooting club. This wasn't as unusual as it might seem. The Soviet Union, surrounded by hostile capitalist nations and paranoid about invasion, encouraged civilian marksmanship. Shooting clubs existed throughout the country, training citizens to defend the motherland if war came. Most participants were men. Lyudmila didn't care. She wanted to shoot, so she shot. And she was good. Very good. She had natural talent, steady hands, sharp eyes, patience, the ability to control her breathing and heart rate. She practiced obsessively. While other girls her age were focused on fashion and romance, Lyudmila was at the shooting range, perfecting her technique. She learned to shoot from various positions. She learned to estimate range and wind. She learned to wait, to be patient, to take the shot only when it was perfect. By her late teens, Lyudmila was one of the best markswomen in Kiev. She could outshoot most men. This gave her confidence, a sense that she could do anything men could do, perhaps do it better. This attitude, this absolute refusal to accept gender limitations, would define her entire life. In 1937, At age 21, Lyudmila enrolled at Kyiv University to study history. She was pursuing what she loved, understanding the past, learning how civilizations rose and fell, how wars were won and lost. She was particularly interested in military history. While studying ancient battles and medieval campaigns, she continued shooting competitively. She married briefly, had a son named Rostislav, divorced. She was focused on her education and her shooting. Life seemed full of possibilities. Then came June 22, 1941, the date that changed everything. The date that transformed the Soviet Union from an uneasy peace into total war. Nazi Germany, having conquered most of Western Europe, launched Operation Barbarossa, the largest military invasion in human history. Over 3 million German soldiers, supported by thousands of tanks and aircraft, smashed across the Soviet border. Stalin, who had ignored all warnings of the impending attack, was caught completely unprepared. The Red Army, devastated by Stalin's purges that had killed most experienced officers, collapsed. German forces advanced hundreds of kilometers in days. Entire Soviet armies were encircled and destroyed. Hundreds of thousands of Soviet soldiers surrendered or died. The situation was catastrophic. The Soviet people faced annihilation. Hitler's plan wasn't just military conquest, it was genocide. The Nazis viewed Slavs as subhuman. Their plan, General Plan Ost, called for the deliberate starvation and murder of tens of millions of Soviet civilians to make room for German settlers. This wasn't a normal war. This was existential. Lose, and the Soviet Union would cease to exist. Millions would be murdered. Survivors would become slaves. Lyudmila understood this immediately. When the news of the invasion spread through Kyiv, she didn't hesitate. She went straight to the recruiting station. She would fight. She would kill fascists. She would defend her homeland. That's where our story began, with that recruiting officer who tried to laugh off her demands to be a sniper. After Lyudmila's perfect shots at the recruiting station, everything changed. The officer's contempt turned to respect. Here was someone who could actually fight. They processed her enlistment immediately. She was assigned to the Red Army's 25th Shapayev Rifle Division as a sniper. Most female volunteers were sent to support roles. Not Lyudmila. She had proven herself. She would go to the front lines. Soviet military doctrine actually supported using female snipers. Soviet military theorists believed women had natural advantages for sniping: patience, attention to detail, smaller physical profiles that made concealment easier, and perhaps most importantly, less ego. Male soldiers often took unnecessary risks to prove their courage. Women, the theory went, were more methodical, more willing to wait for the perfect shot rather than taking marginal ones. Whether this theory was accurate or simply justified giving women combat roles, it meant the Red Army trained female snipers while most other armies didn't. Lyudmila underwent intensive training. Soviet sniper training was brutal and comprehensive. Trainees learned advanced marksmanship, shooting from various positions, at different ranges, in various weather conditions. They learned camouflage and concealment, how to become invisible in any terrain, how to move without being detected, how to use natural cover and shadows. They learned observation, how to scan terrain methodically, how to spot enemy positions, how to read the battlefield. They learned to estimate range without instruments, to judge wind speed and direction, to account for temperature and humidity that affected bullet trajectory. But most importantly, they learned patience. A sniper might lie motionless for hours, even days, waiting for one shot. Discomfort didn't matter. Hunger didn't matter. Cold didn't matter. Only the shot mattered. Soviet snipers were taught to think like hunters, to stalk their prey, to understand their enemy's psychology, to anticipate their movements. Lyudmila excelled at all of it. She was a natural. Her years of competitive shooting had given her the technical skills. Her intelligence and education helped her think strategically. Her determination and competitiveness drove her to be the best. She graduated from sniper training with top marks and was sent to her first combat assignment. Odessa, August 1941. The city was under siege. German and Romanian forces were advancing from the west, trying to capture this vital Black Sea port. The Soviet defenders were outnumbered and outgunned, but they fought with desperate ferocity. Every street became a battlefield. Every building became a fortress. The Soviets knew that losing Odessa would give the Axis powers control of the Black Sea coast and endanger the entire southern front. Lyudmila arrived with her division. This was real combat, not training, not theory, but actual warfare with real bullets that killed real people. She was assigned to a sniper unit and given her position. She was 24 years old, had been a soldier for weeks, and was about to kill another human being for the first time. Her first targets were 2 Romanian soldiers advancing through a destroyed neighborhood. She found a position in a ruined building, camouflaged herself, and waited. The soldiers appeared, moving carelessly, thinking they were safe. Lyudmila lined up her shot. One soldier, then the other. Her training took over. Breathing. Aim. Squeeze. Don't pull the trigger. The physics of the shot, not the morality of it. 2 shots. 2 kills. Her first. She felt nothing. No horror. No guilt. No satisfaction. Just focus. Reload. Scan for targets. She was a weapon now, a tool of war. The university student who studied history was gone. Lady Death had arrived. Over the following days and weeks, Lyudmila's kill count climbed. 3 kills became 5. 5 became 10. 10 became 20. She was extraordinarily effective. While other snipers might get 1 or 2 kills per week, Lyudmila was getting multiple kills per day. Part of this was opportunity. Odessa was under constant assault, providing endless targets. But mostly it was skill. She was simply better than almost everyone else. Soviet doctrine encouraged snipers to keep detailed logs. Lyudmila recorded every kill, date, time, location, circumstances. This wasn't morbid bookkeeping. It was intelligence gathering. Patterns emerged. Which times of day had more officer movement? Which approaches did enemy units favor? Where were communication lines? This information helped Soviet commanders plan defenses and counterattacks. As her kill count grew, so did her reputation. Other soldiers began to hear about her. The female sniper who was devastating enemy formations. Soviet propaganda officers took notice. Here was perfect propaganda material. A young woman defending the motherland. Proof that anyone could fight fascism. A symbol of Soviet determination. They began featuring her in newspapers and radio broadcasts. Her fame grew. The Germans noticed too. They knew a skilled sniper was operating in this sector. They could tell by the precision of the kills. Officers shot at distance, always single shots, always fatal. German commanders began warning their troops to be careful in this area. Stay low. Move quickly. Don't silhouette yourself. The Soviet sniper was deadly. They didn't know yet that the sniper was a woman. When they finally learned, it enraged them. The master race being killed by a Slavic woman? It was intolerable. German propaganda called her a sorceress, a demon, a monster. They offered rewards for her capture or death. They sent snipers specifically to hunt her. Lyudmila welcomed them. Killing ordinary soldiers was necessary. Killing enemy snipers was personal. These were hunters like her, skilled professionals, worthy opponents. These duels would test her abilities like nothing else. Her first sniper duel came in September 1941. German intelligence had identified her approximate position. They sent a sniper, an experienced veteran with numerous kills, to eliminate her. He took position somewhere in the ruined buildings opposite her lines. For 2 days, they hunted each other. He would fire at Soviet positions, trying to draw her out. She stayed hidden, watching for muzzle flash, waiting for him to make a mistake. He was good, very good, patient, disciplined. But on the second day, he shifted position carelessly. Just for a moment, his silhouette appeared against a lighter background. That moment was enough. 1 shot, 1 kill. Her first enemy sniper. More duels followed. Sometimes they lasted hours, sometimes days. Each duel was a battle of wits and patience. Who would crack first? Who would take a marginal shot out of frustration? Who would expose themselves accidentally? Lyudmila won every duel. She killed enemy sniper after enemy sniper. By the time the Battle of Odessa ended in October 1941, she had killed 187 confirmed enemy soldiers, including multiple enemy snipers. 187. In just 2 months. At age 24, the defense of Odessa ended in October 1941 with a Soviet evacuation. The city couldn't hold. German forces were too strong. But the defense had been successful in its way. It had tied down Axis forces for months, preventing them from being used elsewhere. The defenders evacuated by sea to Sevastopol, another Black Sea port that would become the site of an even bloodier battle. Lyudmila evacuated with her unit to Sevastopol. If Odessa had been hell, Sevastopol would be worse. The siege of Sevastopol lasted from October 1941 to July 1942, 9 months of brutal fighting. German forces surrounded the city on land while the Luftwaffe bombed it from the air. The Soviet defenders held on with desperate determination, knowing that losing Sevastopol would give Germany complete control of the Black Sea. Lyudmila resumed her sniper work. The terrain around Sevastopol was different from Odessa, more open, rockier, with fewer buildings for concealment. She adapted. A good sniper adapts to any terrain. She learned to use rocky outcroppings for cover, to camouflage herself among stones and sparse vegetation, to move during artillery barges when enemy observers couldn't see through the smoke and dust. Her kill count continued to climb. 190, 200, 210, 220. Each number represented a human life ended by her bullet. She didn't think about that. Couldn't think about that. They were fascists, invaders who had come to murder her people. Everyone she killed was one fewer trying to kill her comrades, one fewer to massacre Soviet civilians, one fewer serving Hitler's genocidal vision. The conditions were terrible. Winter 1941 to 1942 was brutally cold. Soldiers froze in their positions. Supplies were scarce. Food, ammunition, medical supplies all had to come by sea, and German aircraft attacked the supply ships constantly. Wounded soldiers often couldn't be evacuated. They died in field hospitals or fought on despite their injuries. Disease spread, typhus, dysentery, pneumonia. The siege slowly ground down the defenders through combat casualties, disease, starvation, and sheer exhaustion. Lyudmila endured it all. She continued to fight, continued to kill. Her reputation grew even larger. Soviet newspapers called her Lady Death. She was featured in propaganda photographs, shown as a symbol of Soviet resistance. Her image appeared on posters. Radio broadcasts told her story. She became one of the most famous soldiers in the Red Army. The Germans intensified their efforts to kill her. They knew her position generally, knew her hunting grounds. They sent more snipers. She killed them. They sent small assault teams to raid her positions. She killed them or escaped. They targeted her sector with heavy artillery, trying to kill her through random bombardment. She survived by constantly changing positions, never staying in one place too long, always moving, always alert. Her most famous duel occurred in late 1941 or early 1942. Soviet records weren't precise about dates during the chaos of the siege. German intelligence identified her approximate location and sent what they called a super sniper, a highly decorated marksman with over 100 kills, specifically trained in counter-sniper operations. His mission was simple: kill Lady Death. The duel began when he fired on Soviet positions near where Lyudmila was operating. She immediately recognized this wasn't an ordinary soldier taking random shots. This was a professional, making careful shots, trying to draw her out. She didn't take the bait. She stayed hidden, observing, waiting. For 3 days, they hunted each other. He would fire from different positions, trying to establish a pattern she might respond to. She watched every shot, trying to determine his locations, his preferred ranges, his methodology. Neither could spot the other. Both were too skilled, too careful. He used decoys. She used decoys. He fired at mannequins dressed in Soviet uniforms, hoping she would move to check if her comrades were hit. She didn't fall for it. She set up dummy sniper positions with helmets on sticks, hoping he would fire and reveal his position. He didn't fall for it either. This was psychological warfare as much as marksmanship. Who would crack first? Who would lose patience? Who would make the tiny mistake that meant death? On the 3rd day, he made his mistake. Perhaps he was exhausted. Perhaps he was frustrated. Perhaps he simply got careless for 1 second. He shifted position, and for just a moment, a fraction of a second, his silhouette appeared against the sky. That was all Lyudmila needed. She had been watching that exact spot, waiting for exactly this moment. One shot. The German super sniper fell dead. Lyudmila's kill count reached 250, then 270, then 290. By the spring of 1942, she had been fighting for nearly a year, an eternity in combat terms. Most soldiers didn't survive that long. Most snipers especially didn't survive that long. Snipers were high-value targets. When discovered, they faced immediate, overwhelming violence. Artillery strikes, assault teams, counter-sniper operations. The life expectancy of a Soviet sniper in active combat was measured in weeks, maybe months. Yet Lyudmila survived month after month, kill after kill. She survived through skill, discipline, and luck. Skill in shooting, in camouflage, in reading the battlefield. Discipline in never taking unnecessary risks, never exposing herself carelessly, never letting exhaustion or hunger or fear compromise her operational security. And luck, the random chance that separated survivors from casualties in the chaos of modern warfare. But luck runs out. On June 1942, Lyudmila's luck almost did. She was in position, observing enemy movements through her scope, when German artillery began a bombardment. Artillery fire was constant during the siege, so common that soldiers barely reacted unless shells landed very close. This bombardment was different. It was heavy, concentrated, walking toward her position. German forward observers had spotted something. Maybe just suspicious activity in this area. The shells crept closer. Closer. She needed to move, but moving during a bombardment was dangerous. She stayed low, hoping the barrage would shift. Then a shell landed close. Very close. The explosion was overwhelming. Sound, pressure, heat, flying metal. Shrapnel tore through the air. Pieces of rock and metal became deadly projectiles. Lyudmila was thrown by the blast, struck by shrapnel. She felt pain, sharp, burning pain in multiple places. Blood. She was wounded. Other soldiers reached her, dragged her to cover. Medics examined her wounds. Shrapnel in her face, her arms, her shoulder. Serious, but not immediately fatal if treated properly. They bandaged her, gave her what medical treatment was available. Very little given the supply situation. She would survive, but she needed real medical care, needed to be evacuated from Sevastopol. Her combat career was over. At age 25, after 10 months of combat, Lyudmila Pavlichenko's time as an active sniper ended. Her final confirmed kill count, 309. Her estimated total, over 700. Enemy snipers killed, 36. She was, and remains, the most successful female sniper in history. Lyudmila was evacuated from Sevastopol by submarine. One of the last evacuations before the city fell to German forces in July 1942. She was taken to a hospital in the Soviet rear, where doctors worked to remove shrapnel and treat her wounds. Some fragments were too dangerous to remove and would remain in her body for the rest of her life. The wounds healed slowly. She would recover, but she would never return to combat. The Soviet government had other plans for her anyway. Lyudmila Pavlichenko was too valuable as a propaganda symbol to risk at the front lines. She was a hero of the Soviet Union, one of the most decorated female soldiers in Soviet history. Her story inspired millions of Soviet citizens. Now they would use her to inspire the world. In the fall of 1942, while still recovering from her wounds, Lyudmila was sent to the United States as part of a Soviet goodwill delegation. The purpose was to encourage American support for the Soviet war effort and to push for the opening of a second front in Western Europe that would relieve pressure on the Soviet Union. Stalin was desperate for the United States and Britain to invade German-occupied France, forcing Hitler to divert forces away from the Eastern Front, where the Soviet Union was bleeding to death. Lyudmila arrived in America in late 1942. She was 26 years old, a combat veteran with 309 confirmed kills, about to encounter a country that had no idea what to make of her. She became the first Soviet citizen received at the White House. President Franklin D. Roosevelt and First Lady Eleanor Roosevelt welcomed her personally. Roosevelt understood her symbolic value. Here was proof that the Soviet Union was fighting desperately against Nazi Germany, that Soviet citizens of all kinds were making incredible sacrifices. American public opinion was divided about supporting the Soviet Union. Many Americans distrusted Stalin's communist dictatorship. Lyudmila's story could help shift public opinion. Eleanor Roosevelt was immediately fascinated by Lyudmila. Here was a woman who had done what no American woman was allowed to do: fight in combat, kill enemies, prove herself equal to any man in warfare. Eleanor became Lyudmila's friend and advocate, accompanying her on the tour, helping her navigate American culture and media. The American press didn't know what to do with Lyudmila Pavlichenko. She didn't fit any category they understood. She was a woman, but she was a soldier. She was young and could be called attractive, but she had killed hundreds of men. She was foreign, communist, and completely uninterested in conforming to American expectations of how women should behave. American journalists asked her idiotic questions. They asked about her uniform. Did she think it was flattering? They asked if she wore makeup in combat. They asked about her love life. They asked if killing made her feel unfeminine. The questions revealed how fundamentally these journalists failed to understand what she represented and what the war in the East truly meant. Lyudmila's patience wore thin quickly. At one press conference in Chicago, after yet another round of condescending questions about her appearance and femininity, she finally snapped. She rose to her feet, fixed the assembled journalists with a withering stare, and delivered a speech that shocked America. "Gentlemen," she said, her voice cold with controlled fury, "I am 25 years old, and I have killed 309 fascist invaders by now. Don't you think, gentlemen, that you have been hiding behind my back for too long?" The room went silent. The journalists, safe American men who had never heard a shot fired in anger, who treated war as an abstraction, who patronized her while she had been fighting and killing and nearly dying for her country, had nothing to say. She had just called them cowards to their faces, and they knew she was right. The speech became famous. It was reported across America. Some found it shocking, inappropriate for a woman. Others found it inspiring. Finally, someone was telling Americans the truth about the war. While America debated entry into European ground combat, the Soviet Union was bleeding. While American journalists asked about makeup, Soviet soldiers were dying by the millions. Lyudmila's rebuke struck a nerve. Eleanor Roosevelt admired her even more after this. Here was a woman who refused to be diminished, who spoke truth regardless of social expectations, who had proven herself in the most extreme circumstances imaginable. Eleanor invited Lyudmila to stay at the White House, an extraordinary gesture. They became genuine friends despite the language barrier and vast cultural differences. Lyudmila toured America for several months. She spoke at rallies, factories, universities. She described the war on the Eastern Front, the scale of it, the brutality of it, the desperation of Soviet resistance. American audiences were stunned. They had no conception of what the war in the East was like. In the West, warfare was still somewhat civilized. There were rules. Prisoners were usually treated decently. Civilians were mostly spared. In the East, it was total war, war of annihilation, war without mercy or quarter. Lyudmila told them about Stalingrad, where the battle was so intense that average life expectancy for Soviet soldiers was 24 hours. She told them about Leningrad, under siege, where hundreds of thousands of civilians starved to death. She told them about Nazi atrocities, mass executions, entire villages burned, Jews murdered by the millions. She told them that the Soviet Union was fighting not just for victory, but for survival, that every day the Second Front wasn't opened meant more Soviet deaths. Some Americans were moved. Many donated to Soviet war relief. War bond sales increased. Public opinion shifted somewhat towards supporting greater aid to the Soviet Union. But the Second Front didn't open, not yet. That would come in June 1944 with D-Day, still 2 years away. Until then, the Soviet Union would continue to bear the overwhelming burden of fighting Nazi Germany. Lyudmila also toured Canada and Britain during this trip. Everywhere she went, she challenged assumptions about women, about war, about what was possible. She showed that women could be warriors, could kill, could survive and excel in combat. This was radical in 1942. Most militaries restricted women to support roles. The idea that women could be frontline combat soldiers, let alone successful snipers, challenged fundamental assumptions about gender and capability. After several months abroad, Lyudmila returned to the Soviet Union. She was still recovering from her wounds and was not medically cleared for combat duty. Instead, she became a sniper instructor, teaching new generations of Soviet snipers the skills and tactics that had kept her alive and made her so deadly. She trained hundreds of snipers, passing on her knowledge and experience. Many of her students would go on to distinguished combat careers of their own. She also continued her education. Remember, before the war, she had been a university student studying history. She returned to her studies, even while working as an instructor. She completed her degree and later earned a master's degree in history. After the war, she became a historian and researcher, working in Soviet military archives and educational institutions. The war ended in May 1945 with Nazi Germany's complete defeat. The cost to the Soviet Union had been almost incomprehensible. Estimates vary, but the Soviet Union suffered roughly 27 million deaths, soldiers and civilians. Entire cities were destroyed. The western regions of the country were devastated. Nearly every Soviet family lost someone. The victory was total, but the price was almost unbearable. Lyudmila survived. She had fought at Odessa and Sevastopol, two of the war's bloodiest battles. She had killed 309 confirmed enemies and perhaps 700 or more total. She had been wounded but recovered. She had become famous, toured the world, challenged assumptions, inspired millions. She had survived when most snipers died. She had proven that women could be warriors, could be as deadly as any man, could excel in the most extreme circumstances imaginable. After the war, she lived a quieter life. She worked as a historian and researcher. She taught at Kiev University. She wrote her memoirs, though they weren't published in full until decades later. She married again, this time to a Soviet army officer. She raised her son. She lived as normal a life as possible for someone who had been Lady Death, who had killed hundreds, who had looked through a scope and ended lives with clinical precision. But she never forgot. In interviews later in life, she spoke about the war matter-of-factly. She didn't glamorize it. She didn't express regret about the killing. She had fought because she had to, because her country was fighting for survival against genocidal invaders. Every German soldier she killed was one fewer trying to kill her people. That was the calculus of total war. That was the reality of the Eastern Front. She had done what needed to be done. She corresponded with Eleanor Roosevelt for many years after the war. The friendship they formed during that strange tour of America in 1942 lasted decades. They wrote letters, exchanged gifts, remembered each other. It's a remarkable thing. Two women from completely different worlds, one a communist sniper, the other the wife of an American president, forming a genuine friendship based on mutual respect and shared understanding that women were capable of anything. Lyudmila Pavlichenko died on October 10, 1974, at age 58. The cause of death was stroke. She was buried with full military honors at Moscow's prestigious Novodevichy Cemetery, where many of the Soviet Union's heroes are interred. Her grave is marked with a simple stone bearing her name, rank, and the Hero of the Soviet Union medal. Visitors still leave flowers there. Veterans, historians, feminists, anyone interested in remarkable people who did extraordinary things. They visit her grave and remember Lady Death. Her legacy is complex and multifaceted. In Russia and Ukraine, she is remembered as a war hero, one of the great defenders of the motherland during the Great Patriotic War. Her story is taught in schools. Memorials honor her. She represents the enormous sacrifice Soviet people made to defeat Nazi Germany. In the West, her story is less well known but increasingly recognized. Military historians study her tactics and career. Feminist scholars point to her as an example of women's capabilities in traditionally male roles. Her story has been featured in books, documentaries, and films. She has become a symbol of female empowerment, proof that women can excel in any field, even warfare and killing. But perhaps her most important legacy is what she proved in 1941 and 1942. She proved that gender doesn't determine capability, that women can be soldiers, can be snipers, can kill enemies with the same skill and determination as men, that courage and competence aren't masculine or feminine. They're human qualities that anyone can possess. She also proved something about total war. The Eastern Front in World War II was the most destructive conflict in human history. The scale of violence, the brutality, the absolute nature of the fighting, it was unprecedented. In that kind of war, everyone fought. Men, women, old, young. Everyone who could hold a weapon, could work in a factory, could contribute to the war effort did so. The Soviet Union mobilized over 800,000 women into combat roles during World War II. Lyudmila Pavlichenko was the most successful of them, but she wasn't alone. Soviet women served as pilots, tank drivers, machine gunners, anti-aircraft crews, and yes, snipers. This was necessity. The Soviet Union was fighting for survival against an enemy that wanted to literally exterminate them. Gender equality wasn't the goal, survival was. But in the process, these women proved they were capable of anything. They broke barriers not through political activism, but through blood and sacrifice. The details of Lyudmila's sniper career reveal just how skilled she was. Her 309 confirmed kills might seem high, but confirmation required verification, usually a witness or physical evidence of the kill. Many of her kills probably couldn't be confirmed in the chaos of combat. Soviet intelligence estimated her total kills exceeded 700 based on ammunition expenditure reports, observation reports, and her own log entries. Even if we take only the confirmed 309 kills, that makes her one of the deadliest snipers in history, male or female. What's particularly remarkable is that 36 of her confirmed kills were enemy snipers. Counter-sniper work is the most dangerous type of sniping. You're hunting someone who is hunting you. Both of you are skilled, patient, and deadly. Both of you understand how snipers operate. It becomes a battle of wits as much as marksmanship. Most snipers avoided counter-sniper duels if possible, too risky. Lyudmila sought them out. She killed every enemy sniper she dueled with. Her record in sniper versus sniper combat was perfect. Her tactics were textbook but executed flawlessly. She practiced extraordinary patience, sometimes remaining motionless for hours waiting for the perfect shot. She never took marginal shots. She never exposed herself unnecessarily. She constantly changed positions, never firing more than a few shots from the same location before moving. She used decoys to draw out enemy snipers. She studied German uniforms and could identify officers at great distances. She kept meticulous records that provided valuable intelligence. But beyond tactics, she had psychological strength that separated her from ordinary soldiers. Killing another human being, even an enemy, affects most people profoundly. Combat trauma, PTSD, moral injury, these are real and debilitating for many soldiers. Lyudmila seemed largely unaffected. She killed methodically, clinically, without apparent emotional distress. This wasn't psychopathy. She was capable of normal human emotions and relationships. It was compartmentalization. She separated the act of killing from her emotional life. The enemy weren't people. They were targets. They were fascists, invaders, threats to her people. Eliminating them was necessary, moral, even righteous. This mindset is what separates successful combat soldiers from those who break under the stress. Not everyone can kill. Not everyone can kill repeatedly without psychological damage. Lyudmila could. Whether this was natural temperament, training, ideological conviction, or some combination, it made her extraordinarily effective as a combat sniper. Modern military forces still study Lyudmila Pavlichenko's career. Her tactics, her psychology, her methods, all are analyzed and taught in sniper schools worldwide. The Soviet sniper manual that codified tactics based on snipers like Lyudmila influenced military doctrine across the world. Many of the techniques taught to modern snipers, patience, camouflage, range estimation, counter-sniper tactics, were perfected by Soviet snipers during World War II. Her career also opened doors for women in combat. While most militaries continued to restrict women to support roles for decades after World War II, the example of Soviet female soldiers, particularly snipers like Lyudmila, proved that women could perform in combat. Eventually, slowly, militaries around the world began opening combat roles to women. The United States didn't fully open combat roles to women until 2013, nearly 70 years after World War II ended. But each step toward equality owed something to women like Lyudmila who proved what was possible. There's also a darker side to her story that deserves acknowledgement. She was a Soviet hero, yes, but she fought for Stalin's Soviet Union, a totalitarian dictatorship responsible for millions of deaths through purges, famines, and political terror. The Soviet Union she defended committed horrific atrocities. Stalin was in many ways as monstrous as Hitler, just with different ideological justifications. Soviet forces committed mass rapes, murders, and other war crimes as they advanced through Eastern Europe. Does this tarnish Lyudmila's legacy? That's complicated. She didn't fight for Stalin's ideology necessarily. She fought to defend her homeland against genocidal invasion. Nazi Germany's plans for the Soviet Union, enslavement, mass murder, deliberate starvation, were real and documented. Soviet citizens faced annihilation. In that context, fighting back wasn't supporting communism or Stalin. It was self-defense, survival. But we can't ignore the broader context. Soviet soldiers, even heroes like Lyudmila, fought for a system that oppressed its own people. After the war, Stalin's dictatorship continued. The freedoms and equality that the war supposedly defended didn't exist in Soviet reality. Women gained some opportunities through their war service, but the Soviet Union remained deeply sexist in many ways. Lyudmila herself faced some of this. Despite her heroism, she was never allowed to return to combat, was used as propaganda, was managed by male political officers who controlled her story. So how should we remember Lyudmila Pavlichenko? As a hero? A killer? A symbol of female empowerment? A propaganda tool? A product of total war? The answer is probably all of these things simultaneously. She was undeniably heroic in combat. She faced death repeatedly, survived when most didn't, and killed enemies who would have gladly killed her and her countrymen. She was brave, skilled, and determined. These are admirable qualities regardless of political context. She was also a killer, the deadliest female sniper in history. She ended hundreds of lives, methodically, deliberately, without apparent remorse. Even if every kill was justified by the circumstances of war, we shouldn't romanticize the act of killing. She took human lives. That's a grave thing, even in war. She was certainly a symbol of female empowerment, proof that women can excel in any field. But she was also used by Soviet propaganda in ways that might have made her uncomfortable. Her story was shaped and controlled by political officers to serve the state's narrative. She had limited agency in how she was portrayed and used. And she was definitely a product of total war, the kind of conflict so extreme, so desperate, that normal social boundaries collapse. In peacetime Soviet Union, she would never have been allowed to be a sniper. But in total war, facing annihilation, the Soviet Union needed every fighter it could get. Necessity broke down barriers that ideology and tradition had maintained. The truth is that Lyudmila Pavlichenko was a complex human being who lived through extraordinary circumstances and did extraordinary things. She was capable of great violence and great kindness. She killed hundreds, but also taught, mentored, and cared for her students. She was a product of her time and place, shaped by Soviet ideology and total war, but also an individual who made her own choices and shaped her own destiny within the limited options available to her. Her story matters because it challenges our assumptions about women, about war, about what humans are capable of when pushed to extremes. It's uncomfortable in many ways. We prefer our heroes to be simple, our stories to have clear morals. Lyudmila's story is messy, complicated, troubling, and inspiring all at once. That's probably what makes it worth remembering. Easy stories don't teach us much. Complicated stories, stories that force us to grapple with contradictions and moral ambiguity, those stories stay with us and make us think. In the decades since her death, interest in Lyudmila Pavlichenko has grown. Books have been written about her. Documentaries have featured her. Movies have portrayed her, though often with significant dramatic license. Her story has been shared across the internet, sometimes accurately, often not. She's become a figure in popular culture, recognized even by people who know little else about World War II or Soviet history. This growing recognition is partly due to increased interest in women's history and women in combat. As modern militaries have opened combat roles to women, historical examples like Lyudmila have become more relevant and interesting. She's proof of concept, evidence that women can succeed in roles historically reserved for men. But there's also something inherently fascinating about her story regardless of gender politics. A university student who became history's deadliest female sniper. A woman who killed over 300 enemies and survived. Someone who faced death daily for months, endured unimaginable hardship, and kept fighting. That's a compelling story whoever the protagonist is. What would Lyudmila think of her modern fame? It's hard to say. In her later years, she was a private person who didn't seek attention. She wrote about the war matter-of-factly, without drama or self-aggrandizement. She seemed to view her combat service as something she did because it needed doing, not as something that made her special. She was proud of her service, certainly, but not boastful. She had proven what needed proving, that she was capable, that women were capable. After that, she just wanted to live her life. But she also understood the symbolic importance of her story. She knew she had inspired people during the war and continued to inspire people after. She cooperated with historians and interviewers, providing details about her service. She preserved documents and photographs. She understood that her story was bigger than just her personal experience. It was part of the larger story of World War II, Soviet resistance, and women's capabilities. Perhaps she would be pleased that people still remember, that her story still inspires, that young women learn about her and think, if she could do that, what can I do? That's a legacy worth having. Let's talk numbers one more time, because they're genuinely staggering. 309 confirmed kills. Over 700 estimated total. 36 enemy snipers. In approximately 8 months of active combat. That's more than 1 confirmed kill per day, on average. Some days, certainly, she had no opportunities. Some days she might have had multiple kills. But the average works out to a relentless pace of killing. For comparison, consider that the average American soldier in World War II fired relatively few shots and scored even fewer kills. Most soldiers never killed anyone directly. Infantry combat is mostly suppressive fire, shooting to keep enemy heads down, not necessarily to hit anyone. Snipers are different. Every shot is aimed at a specific target. Every shot is intended to kill. Lyudmila took hundreds of aimed shots and killed with most of them. Her accuracy rate was extraordinarily high. The psychological toll of this should have been immense. Post-traumatic stress disorder affects many combat veterans, particularly those with high kill counts. Yet Lyudmila seemed to function normally after the war. She had nightmares sometimes, reportedly. She occasionally struggled with her memories. But she wasn't broken by her experience. She completed her education, had a career, maintained relationships, lived a full life. How did she do it? Probably several factors. First, Soviet culture valorized military service and sacrifice. She was a hero, constantly reinforced in that identity. That positive social reinforcement can be protective against PTSD. Second, she had purpose and ideology. She believed she was fighting a just war against genocidal invaders. Moral certainty helps soldiers cope with killing. Third, she had peer support, other veterans who understood what she'd experienced. And fourth, she was simply psychologically resilient in ways that remained somewhat mysterious. Some people can endure trauma that would break others. Lyudmila was one of those people. But don't mistake resilience for absence of impact. The war shaped her profoundly. She carried shrapnel in her body for the rest of her life, physical reminders of the violence she experienced. She carried memories of comrades who died, enemies she killed, horrors she witnessed. She was changed by the war, as everyone who experienced it was changed. One aspect of Lyudmila's story that deserves more attention is her friendship with Eleanor Roosevelt. It's genuinely remarkable when you think about it. Eleanor was 58 years old in 1942, wife of the American president, from a privileged background, educated and cultured, but never faced physical danger. Lyudmila was 26, a combat veteran, from a working-class Soviet background, educated but in a completely different tradition, literally had killed hundreds of people. They had almost nothing in common. Yet they formed a real friendship. Eleanor recognized in Lyudmila something extraordinary: courage, determination, intelligence, refusal to accept limitations. Lyudmila recognized in Eleanor a kindred spirit despite their differences, someone who believed women could do anything, who challenged social conventions, who cared about justice and equality. They corresponded for decades after the war. Eleanor sent gifts to Lyudmila's son. Lyudmila sent Russian handicrafts to Eleanor. They wrote about their lives, their work, their hopes for peace. When Eleanor died in 1962, Lyudmila was genuinely grieved. She had lost one of her few real friends from that surreal period when she toured America as Lady Death. This friendship mattered because it humanized both women to the other's culture. Americans who heard about Lyudmila's friendship with Eleanor saw her not as a communist propaganda figure, but as a real person whom the beloved First Lady respected and befriended. Soviets who heard about it saw Americans not as capitalist enemies, but as people capable of genuine friendship across ideological divides. It was a small thing, perhaps, in the grand scheme of the Cold War and global politics. But it mattered to the two women involved. and it showed that even across vast cultural and political divides, human connection is possible. This has been the story of Lyudmila Pavlichenko, university student, sniper, killer, hero, propaganda symbol, friend, mother, historian, and legend. She was 24 years old when she demanded to fight. She was 25 when she became the deadliest female sniper in history. She was 26 when she toured America and challenged Western assumptions about women and war. She lived to 58, long enough to see the war fade into history, to see her story become legend, to see women slowly gain opportunities she had fought to prove they deserved. 309 confirmed kills. Over 700 estimated total. 36 enemy snipers. 8 months of combat. Wounded but survived. Hero of the Soviet Union. Lady Death. The deadliest woman in history. But also, university student who loved history. Mother who raised her son. Friend who corresponded with Eleanor Roosevelt. Teacher who trained hundreds of snipers. Historian who worked in archives. Woman who lived, loved, suffered, survived, and left a legacy that still inspires and challenges us today. Her story forces us to confront uncomfortable truths. Women are capable of killing just as men are. War transforms everyone it touches, breaks some, hardens others. Heroism is complicated, exists even in flawed systems, doesn't erase the horror of what war requires. Legacy is what we make of it, how we remember and what we learn. Lyudmila Pavlichenko proved that women could be warriors. She proved it with 309 confirmed kills, with survival against impossible odds, with courage that earned her the respect of friends and fear of enemies. She proved it so thoroughly that nobody could deny it, though many tried to forget it or minimize it after the war ended. We should remember her, not just as a statistic or a symbol, but as a complex human being who did extraordinary things in extraordinary circumstances. We should tell her story accurately, acknowledging both her achievements and the darker contexts in which they occurred. We should let her story challenge our assumptions and make us think about war, gender, capability, and the extreme things humans are capable of when necessity demands it. 309 confirmed kills. Lady Death, the deadliest woman in history. Lyudmila Mikhailovna Pavlichenko. Remember her name. This has been her story. May we honor her memory by remembering the truth of who she was and what she did. May we learn from her example, not just about war and combat, but about determination, capability, and refusing to accept limitations others place on us. And may we never forget the cost of war, the sacrifices made, and the complicated legacies left by those who fought in humanity's darkest hours. The technical aspects of Lyudmila's sniping deserve deeper examination, because understanding how she achieved such extraordinary kill counts reveals both her skill and the nature of sniper warfare on the Eastern Front. A sniper isn't just a soldier with a rifle and a scope. A sniper is a hunter, a stalker, a predator who must combine marksmanship with fieldcraft, patience with aggression, invisibility with lethality. Lyudmila's weapon was the Mosin-Nagant M1891/30 sniper rifle, the standard Soviet sniper rifle of World War II. It was a bolt-action rifle firing the 7.62 x 54 mmR cartridge, powerful, accurate, and reliable. The rifle weighed about 4 kilograms unloaded. It was fitted with a PE or PU telescopic sight providing 3.5x or 4x magnification. This was modest compared to modern sniper scopes, but sufficient for the typical engagement ranges of 100 to 400 meters that characterized most sniper work. The Mosin-Nagant was old technology even in 1941. The basic design dated to the 1890s. But old doesn't mean ineffective. The rifle was simple, robust, and accurate. It functioned in extreme cold that would jam more complex weapons. It could be maintained with minimal tools. Ammunition was standardized and plentiful. For a sniper operating in brutal conditions with limited support, reliability mattered more than cutting-edge technology. Lyudmila knew her rifle intimately. She could field strip and reassemble it blindfolded. She knew exactly how it shot, the peculiarities of her specific rifle, how the barrel heated and affected accuracy, how different ammunition batches performed, how wind and temperature affected bullet trajectory. This deep familiarity meant she could make accurate shots instinctively, compensating for variables without conscious calculation. Soviet sniper training emphasized understanding ballistics. Trainees learned how bullets drop over distance due to gravity. They learned how wind deflects bullets, more at longer ranges, more with crosswinds than headwinds or tailwinds. They learned how temperature affects air density and bullet velocity. They learned how humidity, altitude, and even the rotation of the Earth, for very long shots, influence bullet flight. Most importantly, they learned to estimate all these factors quickly in combat conditions without instruments or calculations. Lyudmila's fieldcraft was equally important. Snipers must be invisible. The moment an enemy spots a sniper's position, artillery fire or assault teams descend. Survival requires never being seen, never being located, always moving after shots are fired. Soviet snipers were masters of camouflage and concealment. Camouflage began with uniform. Soviet snipers wore standard uniforms, but modified them with local vegetation. Lyudmila would attach leaves, grass, branches to her uniform, breaking up her human outline. She used ghillie suits sometimes, special camouflage garments covered with strips of fabric and vegetation that made the wearer resemble a bush or pile of debris. In winter, white snow camouflage was essential. Any dark object against snow is visible for hundreds of meters. Soviet snipers wore white coverings over their uniforms, white face paint, white wraps on their rifles. But camouflage was more than clothing. It was about understanding how human vision works. Our eyes detect movement first, then contrast, then shapes. A motionless sniper is hard to see. A sniper who moves smoothly and slowly is hard to track. A sniper positioned in shadow, against cluttered backgrounds, with no sharp edges or unnatural shapes, effectively disappears. Lyudmila understood this instinctively. She moved like flowing water, slow and natural. She positioned herself where backgrounds were complex. She never silhouetted against the sky or open spaces. She became part of the landscape. Position selection was critical. A good sniper position provides concealment, fields of fire, escape routes, and protection. Concealment means enemies can't see you. Fields of fire means you can see and shoot at enemy positions. Escape routes means you can leave quickly if discovered. Protection means the position offers some cover from return fire. Finding positions with all four qualities is difficult. Lyudmila was expert at it. She preferred positions with multiple sight lines, allowing her to observe and shoot in several directions without moving much. She liked positions near destroyed buildings where rubble provided both cover and concealment. She used upper floors when possible, gaining elevation advantage. But she avoided obvious positions, bell towers, rooftops, prominent windows. German soldiers learned to watch obvious sniper positions. Lyudmila chose unexpected locations, places enemies wouldn't think to check carefully. Her patience was legendary among those who served with her. Sniping requires waiting, sometimes hours, sometimes days, for the right target and the right shot. Lesser snipers grow impatient, take marginal shots, expose themselves through restlessness. Lyudmila could lie motionless for hours. Fellow soldiers reported watching her remain in position through rain, cold, artillery barges, remaining utterly still, waiting for her moment. This superhuman patience was perhaps her greatest tactical advantage. When she spotted a target, her shot process was methodical. First, identify the target. Is this a priority target, an officer, specialist, machine gunner, or just a random soldier? Priority targets warrant more risk. Second, estimate range. Lyudmila could estimate distance accurately by eye, using reference points, angular measurements, and experience. Third, assess conditions. Wind speed and direction, temperature, whether the shot is uphill or downhill. Fourth, aim. She aimed for center mass usually, the chest, largest target with vital organs. Headshots are dramatic but smaller targets with greater miss probability. Fifth, control breathing. Breathe slowly. Hold breath mid-exhale when lungs are still. Sixth, squeeze the trigger smoothly. Don't jerk it. Let the shot surprise you. Finally, observe the hit. Then immediately prepare to move. After firing, Lyudmila never stayed in position long. The shot's sound and muzzle flash could reveal her location. Smart enemies would have spotters watching for muzzle flash. Artillery standing by to saturate the area. She fired, observed the hit, then moved to a backup position she'd already selected. Sometimes she moved immediately after one shot. Sometimes she could risk 2 or 3 shots before moving. But she always moved before enemies could respond. Her log-keeping was meticulous. After each engagement, she recorded details in a small notebook. Date, time, location, target description, range, weather conditions, outcome. Sometimes she sketched the position. This wasn't for glory or keeping score. It was intelligence gathering and tactical analysis. Patterns emerged. Enemy officers appeared at certain times and places. Supply convoys followed predictable routes. Machine gun positions favored certain buildings. This intelligence, compiled and reported, helped Soviet commanders plan operations. The psychological dimension of sniping is often overlooked but critically important. Snipers must be comfortable with killing in a very personal way. Artillery crews never see their victims. Pilots drop bombs from altitude. Infantry engage in chaotic firefights where it's unclear who kills whom. But snipers see their targets clearly through scopes. They see faces, expressions, movements. They watch the target before shooting, during shooting, after shooting. They see the body fall. They see comrades react to the death. It's intimate and personal in ways other combat isn't. Most people find this disturbing. Lyudmila apparently didn't, or at least managed to compartmentalize effectively. She described shooting enemies as mechanical, like target practice. They were targets, not people. They were fascists, invaders, enemies of her people. Killing them was righteous, necessary, even satisfying in a professional sense. The satisfaction of a difficult job done well. But sniping also involves psychological warfare. The presence of a skilled sniper creates fear and paralysis among enemy troops. Soldiers become afraid to move, to show themselves, to perform their duties. Officers won't inspect positions. Communications break down. Unit effectiveness degrades. One sniper can terrorize an entire company, keeping hundreds of soldiers suppressed and afraid. This force multiplication is why skilled snipers are so valuable despite their relatively low kill counts compared to artillery or air power. Lyudmila understood this. She deliberately targeted officers and specialists, knowing this would create maximum disruption. She operated in the same sectors repeatedly, building a reputation, becoming a known threat. German soldiers in her operational areas knew about the Soviet female sniper. They warned each other. Some refused to take positions in her hunting grounds. Fear spread through whispers and rumors, magnifying her impact beyond her actual kills. Counter-sniper operations against her were constant. Germans sent snipers specifically to hunt her. She killed all of them. How? Several factors. First, she had home advantage. She knew the terrain, knew where to hide, where to shoot from. Second, she had patience to let enemy snipers expose themselves first. Third, she used decoys and deception. Fourth, she was simply better than most of them. German snipers were well trained, but many had less combat experience than Lyudmila. By late 1941, she had months of daily combat experience. She had learned lessons that couldn't be taught in training. She had developed instincts that came only from survival. The duels deserve individual attention because they're where Lyudmila's skill shone brightest. Imagine, 2 professional killers, both armed with scoped rifles, both trained in camouflage and fieldcraft, both patient and disciplined, both hunting each other. It's psychological chess played with lethal stakes. One mistake and you're dead. One moment of impatience, one careless movement, one predictable pattern, fatal. Her most famous duel, the 3-day confrontation with the German super sniper, illustrates her methodology. Day 1. The German arrived, fired several shots at Soviet positions. Lyudmila observed, didn't respond. She was studying him, his timing, his positions, his patterns. Day 2. He continued operations, trying to draw her out with provocations. She remained hidden, continuing her observations. She now understood his operational patterns, preferred ranges, likely positions. Day 3. She set her trap. She positioned herself with sight lines on his probable locations. She used a decoy in one of her previous positions, hoping he'd fire at it and reveal himself. He didn't take that bait, but he did make a tiny mistake, shifted position carelessly, silhouetted briefly against lighter background. She was watching that exact spot, waiting for exactly this mistake. One shot, one kill. Perfect execution. This exemplifies sniper warfare at the highest level. It wasn't about quick reactions or superior equipment. It was about patience, observation, understanding your opponent's psychology, setting conditions for success, then capitalizing instantly when opportunity appeared. Lyudmila was a grandmaster at this deadly game. She also innovated tactically within the constraints of her equipment and doctrine. She sometimes worked with a spotter, another soldier who helped observe, estimate ranges, watch for threats. The spotter-sniper team is standard in modern militaries, but was less common in World War II. Lyudmila recognized its value. A second set of eyes, someone to watch your back while you're focused through a scope, dramatically improves effectiveness and survival. She also developed techniques for urban sniping during the battles of Odessa and Sevastopol. Urban environments present unique challenges, shorter sight lines, more hiding places for enemies, acoustics that make shot location harder to determine, rubble and debris affecting bullet trajectory. Lyudmila adapted. She used destroyed buildings' internal structures for concealment. She shot through windows but from deep inside rooms, invisible from outside. She created multiple firing positions in single buildings, moving between them. She used rubble piles as improvised blinds. The physical toll of her sniping career was significant. Lying motionless for hours in wet clothes, in cold temperatures, causes hypothermia and muscle damage. The Mosinagant's recoil, absorbed repeatedly, bruises shoulders. Staring through a scope for extended periods causes eye strain and headaches. Constant alertness causes mental exhaustion. Inadequate food and water cause malnutrition and dehydration. Stress causes insomnia. She endured all of this for months. Her wounds in June 1942 were serious. Shrapnel from mortar or artillery hits her in multiple locations. Some fragments were removed surgically. Others were too close to vital organs or nerves to remove safely and remained in her body permanently. She had scars for the rest of her life, physical reminders of how close she came to death. The fact that she survived it all was partly luck. The fragments could easily have hit something vital, and partly her physical toughness. A frilier person might not have survived the initial wounding or the subsequent evacuation and surgery in primitive conditions. Recovery took months. She had to relearn some physical functions, overcome pain, regain strength. She never fully recovered. Those shrapnel fragments caused periodic pain and complications for the rest of her life. But she recovered enough to function normally, to walk, to work, to live. For a combat veteran of that era, that counted as a good outcome. Many weren't so lucky. Her post-combat role as sniper instructor was important. She trained hundreds of new snipers, passing on her techniques and knowledge. Many of her students went on to distinguished combat records. Some became heroes of the Soviet Union themselves. Through them, her tactical legacy multiplied. The techniques she taught, refined from her combat experience, spread through the Red Army's sniper community. She probably influenced the kill counts of thousands of Soviet snipers who learned directly or indirectly from her. The history degree she completed after the war reflected her original passion. Remember, she was a history student when the war began. She loved studying the past, understanding how events unfolded, learning lessons from history. The war interrupted her studies, transformed her into a warrior, but didn't destroy her intellectual curiosity. She returned to history, completed her degree, eventually earned a master's, worked as a historian and researcher. In some ways, she came full circle, from studying history to making history to studying history again. Her memoirs, published in various forms over the years, provide invaluable first-hand perspective on sniper warfare and women's combat roles. She wrote matter-of-factly, without drama or self-aggrandizement. Her tone was professional, analytical, like a military report rather than an adventure story. She described her training, her tactics, specific engagements, the challenges she faced. She didn't glorify killing or war. She presented it as work, difficult, dangerous work that needed doing. This unsentimental approach makes her accounts more valuable historically. She wasn't romanticizing or propagandizing. She was documenting. The sections about her American tour reveal culture shock from both directions. Lyudmila was bewildered by American abundance, the food, the goods and stores, the casual wealth of average Americans. She was puzzled by American gender attitudes, the assumption that women should be decorative, that femininity and capability were incompatible. She was frustrated by journalists who asked trivial questions while millions were dying. Her famous rebuke, "Don't you think you've been hiding behind my back for too long?" encapsulated her contempt for American comfort while the Soviet Union bled. But she also appreciated aspects of America. The freedom of speech, even when used to ask stupid questions. The absence of fear that characterized Soviet life. The genuine friendliness of ordinary Americans once they got past their preconceptions. And especially her friendship with Eleanor Roosevelt, which transcended cultural differences and gave her a connection to America that lasted decades. Eleanor's impact on Lyudmila shouldn't be underestimated. Eleanor was one of the few people who seemed to understand Lyudmila not as a curiosity or propaganda tool, but as a fellow human being who had done extraordinary things. Eleanor respected her, befriended her, corresponded with her for years. For someone like Lyudmila, shaped by Soviet communism's gender equality rhetoric, but also its practical sexism, having proven herself in combat, but still treated as a propaganda asset, Eleanor's genuine respect and friendship must have been meaningful. Their correspondence reveals two women discussing universal themes: raising children, dealing with loss, hoping for peace, struggling with the legacies of their actions. Eleanor grappled with her husband's decisions as president, including decisions that led to deaths. Lyudmila grappled with her own role as a killer, even a justified killer. Both understood that doing necessary things doesn't make those things easy or free of moral complexity. The broader context of Soviet female combatants deserves exploration because Lyudmila wasn't alone. Over 800,000 Soviet women served in combat roles during World War II. They were pilots, tank drivers, machine gunners, anti-aircraft crews, partisan fighters, and yes, snipers. The Soviet Union mobilized women for combat more extensively than any other World War II belligerent. Why? Partly necessity. The Soviet Union faced annihilation and needed every fighter. Partly ideology. Communist theory emphasized gender equality, at least rhetorically. Soviet propaganda celebrated women workers, women leaders, women heroes. Using women in combat fit this narrative. Partly tradition. Soviet culture included folk memories of women warriors. Joan of Arc wasn't unique to French history. Russian and Soviet history had women who fought. Partly pragmatism. Soviet military theorists believed women had advantages in certain roles. Female pilots were thought to be smoother on controls. Female snipers were thought to be more patient. Whether true or not, these beliefs justified using women in combat. The female snipers were particularly notable. Over 2,000 Soviet women served as snipers during the war. Several achieved kill counts exceeding 100. Lyudmila was the most successful with 309 confirmed, but others were also highly effective. These women challenged assumptions about gender in combat, proved their capabilities in the most extreme circumstances, and paid a terrible price. Many died, many were wounded, all were traumatized. After the war, their stories were somewhat forgotten or sidelined. The Soviet Union celebrated male veterans more prominently. Women veterans faced pressure to return to traditional roles. Some female combat veterans had difficulty finding husbands. Soviet men were uncomfortable with women who had killed. The heroism was acknowledged officially but socially complicated. Lyudmila was luckier than most. Her fame protected her somewhat. She had status as hero of the Soviet Union. She could build a professional career. But even she faced some of this social ambivalence. In the decades since, interest in these women has grown. Historians have documented their service. Books have been written. Museums have exhibits. As modern militaries open combat roles to women, these Soviet female combatants provide historical precedent and evidence that women can succeed in combat. Their stories matter not just as history, but as proof of concept. Let's return to Lyudmila specifically and consider her psychological profile. What kind of person can kill 309+ people and remain functional? This is a serious question, not a rhetorical one. Most people can't kill easily. Humans have psychological inhibitions against killing other humans. Military training works to overcome these inhibitions through desensitization, dehumanization of enemies, emphasis on duty and obedience. But even with training, many soldiers struggle with killing. Some can't do it at all. Others do it, but suffer severe psychological consequences. Lyudmila apparently could kill without severe psychological damage. Several factors probably contributed. First, ideological conviction. She genuinely believed Nazi Germany represented existential threat to her people. Killing fascists wasn't murder, it was righteous defense. This moral certainty protected her psychologically. Second, training and habituation. She began killing in August 1941. By September, she'd killed dozens. By October, over 100. Each kill made the next kill easier psychologically. She became desensitized through repetition. Third, compartmentalization. She separated her identity as sniper from her identity as student, mother, person. When looking through the scope, she was a weapon, a tool, not a person making moral choices. Fourth, social support and validation. Soviet society celebrated her. Fellow soldiers respected her. She was constantly told she was a hero, doing right. This positive reinforcement shaped her psychological response to killing. But we shouldn't assume she was unaffected. She had nightmares. She occasionally struggled with memories. Some kills bothered her more than others. She mentioned in interviews that killing very young soldiers, teenagers, was harder than killing adults. She wasn't a sociopath incapable of empathy. She was a person who found ways to cope with extraordinarily difficult psychological demands. The comparison to male snipers is interesting. Did male snipers cope differently? Research on this is limited, but some patterns exist. Male soldiers often cope through group bonding, humor, aggression, compartmentalization. Female soldiers often cope through meaning-making, connection, purpose, emotional processing. Lyudmila probably used elements of both strategies. She bonded with fellow soldiers. She found meaning in defending her homeland. She processed emotions through writing and later through historical research. She maintained connections with people like Eleanor Roosevelt, who understood her experiences. The question of whether we should celebrate someone with 309+ kills is complicated. Modern society is ambivalent about warriors. We honor them rhetorically, but are uncomfortable with the reality of killing. We want heroes who are noble and pure, not killers. But war requires killing. Defending against aggression requires killing aggressors. Lyudmila killed people who were invading her country, participating in genocidal war. Should we not honor her? Should we ignore her because she was too good at killing? Perhaps the answer is to honor her complexity. She was a killer, let's not shy from that. She ended hundreds of lives deliberately and skillfully. But she was a defender, fighting against invasion and genocide. She was a symbol, proving women's capabilities. She was a teacher, passing on life-saving skills to other soldiers. She was a scholar, contributing to historical knowledge. She was a friend, maintaining decades-long relationships. She was a mother, raising her son. She was human, flawed, complex, remarkable. We can acknowledge all of these facets simultaneously. She was capable of great violence and great kindness. She killed and she nurtured. She was shaped by ideology and by personal choice. She served a flawed system but defended innocent people. These contradictions don't negate each other. They coexist in the complexity of human experience, especially in extreme circumstances like total war. Her legacy ultimately is about capability and determination. She proved that gender doesn't determine what people can achieve. She proved that ordinary people can do extraordinary things when necessity demands and opportunity allows. She proved that stereotypes and assumptions about who can do what are often wrong. These lessons extend beyond military service. They apply to any field where women face barriers or doubts. If a 24-year-old Ukrainian woman can become the deadliest female sniper in history, what else are women capable of that society claims they can't do? This is why her story matters today. Not because we need more warriors or celebrate killing, but because we need examples of people who refused limitations, who proved skeptics wrong, who achieved extraordinary things despite enormous obstacles. Lyudmila Pavlichenko is one such example. Flawed, complicated, troubling in some ways, inspiring in others, but undeniably remarkable. As we close this story, consider what it means to be remembered. Lyudmila died in 1974, nearly 50 years ago. Yet her story persists. Books tell it. Documentaries feature it. Internet articles spread it. New generations discover her. Why does she endure while most World War II soldiers, even heroes, fade into forgotten obscurity? Partly it's the numbers. 309 confirmed kills is staggering, memorable, repeatable. People share extreme statistics. Partly it's the gender angle. The deadliest female sniper is inherently interesting in ways the 10th deadliest male sniper isn't. Society is more interested in women breaking barriers than men succeeding in traditional roles. Partly it's the story itself. University student becomes legendary warrior, tours America, befriends First Lady, survives war, and builds scholarly career. It's a complete narrative arc with drama, achievement, survival. But mostly, she endures because her story asks important questions. About war. About gender. About capability. About what circumstances make ordinary people do extraordinary things. About how we judge historical figures who lived in morally complicated times. About what heroism means when it involves killing. These questions don't have easy answers. Stories without easy answers stay with us longer than simple morality tales. Lyudmila would probably be bemused by all this attention. She seemed to view herself as someone who did what needed doing, nothing more. She didn't seek fame. She didn't glorify her actions. She just fought, survived, moved on with life. The legend built around her wasn't entirely her creation. Much of it was Soviet propaganda, Western fascination, modern interest in women's history. But the core facts remain indisputable. She demanded to fight when told women couldn't. She passed sniper training with perfect scores. She killed 309 confirmed enemies in 8 months of combat. She survived when most snipers died. She killed every enemy sniper sent to hunt her. She was wounded but recovered. She inspired millions and challenged assumptions. These facts speak for themselves, regardless of how we interpret them or what lessons we draw from them. 309 confirmed kills. Over 700 estimated total. 36 enemy snipers. Lady Death, hero of the Soviet Union. The most successful female sniper in military history. A university student who became a legend. A warrior who became a historian. A killer who became a teacher. A woman who proved women could do anything. Remember her name. Lyudmila Pavlichenko. Remember her story in all its complexity. Remember the context, total war, genocidal invasion, desperate defense. Remember the achievements, unmatched skill, extraordinary courage, survival against odds. Remember the questions her story raises and the lessons it teaches. Remember that human beings are capable of far more than we imagine, for good and ill, especially in extraordinary circumstances. This is her legacy. This is her story. This is why, nearly 50 years after her death and over 80 years after her combat service, we still tell her tale. Because it matters. Because she mattered. Because the truth of what she did, complicated, disturbing, and inspiring, deserves to be remembered accurately, completely, and honestly. Lady Death lives on in memory, in history, in the example she set. 309 confirmed kills. The deadliest woman in history. Lyudmila Pavlichenko.